Ommadawn was very special. I need to rewind a little bit, explain the history of the two albums before that. Obviously, you know, Tubular Bells, which was fantastic success. Out of the blue, unexpectedly to everybody. And then after Tubular Bells came Hergestridge, or pronounced properly by the locals Hergestridge, which was a much more, sort of say, pastoral sounding album. These days it would probably be described as this strange term, New Age, whatever that means. That was very badly received. You know, the critical backlash for Hergestridge compared to Tubular Bells was wicked and cruel. You know. At my age then, I was 20, 21, I had no idea about these kind of things, so I took it very personally. So in a way, with Ommadawn, I wanted to do my absolute best. And I'd moved to a little cottage on a hillside on the Welsh border. It was quite high up. It was very breezy in the winter, you know, and very cold. In fact, the carpet of the house, it was a very ramshackle house, used to billow up in the wind in the living room. There was all these holes in the floor. And I had a little studio downstairs. And the record company had given me some very, very good equipment, beautiful Neve console and everything that I needed, you know, they provided, because they wanted me to make a new, really good album. So had all the equipment I needed. I'd learned enough by then about studios to not need an engineer or a producer, so I produced it and engineered it myself, which I love doing. And then I started work. I worked for probably 6 months, and it was a reel-to-reel tape. The tape was about that wide, very big, thick reels of tape, and in those 6 months I'd spun the tape back and forward so many times that the tape started to disintegrate. And all this oxide from the tape was like collecting around the tape heads and powder. And it came to a point where the sound kind of didn't really sound any good anymore. And I couldn't copy it because I'd lost the sound quality. So I had to completely start again. So what you hear as Ommadawn now is actually Ommadawn 2, and I changed a lot of the music, you know, in the second part. Somewhere on the internet, on YouTube, you can still hear, you know, the old version. So I wanted to do it absolutely perfectly. So it was the only time I didn't use the first take of everything. I learned how to drop in. In fact, I used to work the tape recorder with my feet at the time. I could drop very good, you know, pressing the buttons with my toes. So I could be playing something and working the tape machine with my toes. And now I do it again and again until I got it perfectly. And then it was very emotionally charged. I remember the sort of screaming guitar at the end of part one was done in the middle of the most gigantic thunderstorm on top of the hill. You know, the weather can be pretty wild up there, you know. You know, we've got wind coming in from the west and it's coming right up the hill. The thunder and lightning, and I was in there playing away. And then it finished off with this song about riding little Welsh ponies on the hills, which I love to do. It was my way of relaxing on a Sunday morning, you know, get on the little Welsh pony. I mean, it's not like proper horseback, it was like pony tracking, you know. But it was sweet and it was lovely. You know, and they were lovely little animals, you know. And I got some local kids to come and sing the chorus on it. And it all just rounded off, and it became a tremendous success, not only in sales but critically as well. So then I had the up, I had the down, and I had the up again. And I think I probably worked as hard on Ommadawn as I had on Tubular Bells, which was, you know, wasn't just the recording. Tubular Bells was the years and years before actually getting in the studio, the writing of it. So it came a point, what should I do next? And I didn't really have another album in me after Ommadawn. And so those first 3 albums have become like a trilogy. You know, the essence of the early part of my career. And after that, I started doing things like experimenting with more modern music, more contemporary music that wasn't really me, but I started touring, started giving interviews, and did all the things that I hadn't done before. So in that way, it's a very special album, yes. Ommadawn, it comes from the Gaelic Ommadawn, which means fool or idiot. You may wonder why I would call my album Idiot. But, in folklore and in history, the idiot is often the person who, underneath it all, is the real genius, the real magician, you know, because they don't need to pretend to be anything other than a fool. They can be, I mean, like Stephen Hawking, for example, has got a wicked sense of humour, you know. And obviously he's not an idiot, but he can appear to be. So, in a way, it's a sort of reverse compliment to call it Ommadawn. At the beginning of every project, I decide what I'm going to do next. With Man on the Rocks, I like that. I think they call it adult-orientated rock. Is that the right term? I like that sound, you know. And I wanted to see if I could do that. I often set a challenge for myself to see if I'm able to do it. Like the song Moonlight Shadow, that was, you know, I thought, I'll see if I can write a real popular song. You know? It wasn't easy, you know, it didn't come naturally, but I keep pushing and pushing, experimenting, and then eventually managed to make the song. Same with Man on the Rocks. But I'd sort of got that out of my system with Man on the Rocks. And it was a lot of fun. We had these amazing session men from Los Angeles who came as almost like a unit, you know. You'd give them the chords and off they'd go and they'd play and they'd sound exactly right, you know. And then I got this wonderful vocalist, Luke Spiller, to sing on it. Then, having got that out of my system, it was, you know, what shall I do next? And that became Return to Ommadawn. Well, it was a decision I came to, which is to try to recreate the whole atmosphere and the sound and the little nuances of playing that are used on Ommadawn. Ommadawn was all acoustic instruments. There was no synthesizers, apart from the one very early string synthesizer called a Solina. So the first task with Return to Ommadawn was to gather together all the instruments that I would need. I couldn't get all the original instruments, but people have, very clever people have made virtual reality versions of all these things, which I was able to buy and play them all by hand. There's no sequencing, there's no nothing that's not hand played in real time. In fact, I even went so far as to ditch the electronic click track, and I got an old clockwork wind-up metronome which I recorded with a microphone, so it's going tick-tock, tick-tock. So I think it gradually slows down as the clockwork runs out, so I had to keep like winding it up again. It's a good question, actually. In the old days, you didn't have... I suppose the biggest thing is to be able to cut something out and put it somewhere else. Now we can just, with the click of a mouse, cut and drag and drop. You know, it takes half a second. In the old days, you'd have to do things like, if you wanted a loop, you'd have to make an actual tape loop, which means that you'd get a long piece of tape and you'd stick it together with sticky tape, and then you'd put the tape, find strategic points around the room where you could actually put the tape. it wouldn't get stuck up, so that it would go around, it would go like over the chair, go under the table, go over the lamp, and then it would go back in again, you know. I remember doing that a lot with the original Ommadawn, because I wanted this vocal to just be continuous without any breath. It would go, ah, so I had to make tape loops. Now that's the click of the mouse kind of job. But basically it's still the same, unless you're making like a modern kind of album where you do it with a click track and you get the computer to actually play a lot of it. You know. But with Return to Ommadawn, there's none of that. It's all my fingers, either on keyboards or on strings or holding sticks or my mouth playing things. So it's a very human thing, which you... In fact, I've had a long enough break from it now. I was listening to it last night, and I was listening to, you know, there's a person doing that. It's not a machine, it's an actual real person. And there's bits, you know, where I make a bit of a mistake, a note, there's a little buzz on a note there, I can hear my fingernail. Oh, there's a little click of his finger there. There's sometimes where, you know, if you're playing guitar, you play it and it's like talking and you breathe, so you go, and you go, so the breaths are on there. I could have chopped them all out, you know, but why? You know, it's all part of the performance. There's some clicks on there which, you know, but I didn't tidy it up, I didn't sanitize it, you know, so it's got imperfections, but to me that gives it character. Well, when I started it, all I had was the metronome clicking away in complete blank empty space, and I just thought how to start it. I could have gone straight in, but I thought it'd be nice to have like a, you know, what do they call it, the beginning of a piece of music in the theatre, the prelude or something. Then I've also noticed on social media how popular Hergest Ridge still is with a lot of people. In fact, I remember speaking to one very senior BBC DJ who loves Hergest Ridge. The main thing that you remember with Hergest Ridge is the whistles. In those days I had the idea to make this sort of penny whistle orchestra, all very distant with this sort of drone underneath it. And so it gives it a sort of Celtic, you know, misty landscape feeling. And I thought, well, I can do that again. So I decided to use penny whistles because I can play them myself. And started off with this, you know, dreamy penny whistle sound, you know, with a drone, almost like bagpipes, but with penny whistles. You know, just the feeling of like, you know, the Hound of the Baskervilles, this kind of very moody. And so that's one of my favourite bits. And then it goes through all kinds. I think I counted them as over 60 different sections on the whole album. And the big important thing really is the African drum section. Although there's lots of lovely bits in between. There's the question and answer Spanish guitar section, you know, with the kind of ping pong bass, and that's lovely because you have one guitar there saying something, then you have another one there saying something, and then you all the time you're waiting for the African drums to begin, and in the chant, I was a bit like a scientist in a laboratory with the chant, so I went back to the original Ommadawn and took some of the vocals and it broke it down into its component parts and then reversed the waveform. So you know, like when you go yeah, you play something backwards. And there was a couple of little bits in there that I thought, oh, I can use that little bit of backwards, and I'll cut and paste that little bit of backwards with the other little bit of backwards, and there's a little bit of forwards there. And it's like sculpting, you know, making a statue. And instead of stone, I was using, you know, a piece of the original Ommadawn. And just by some chance or whatever, fortune, I stumbled across a whole new melody. And then I had my African drums, which I can't play very well, but I can play well enough to keep a simple beat. And so I started putting something together. But it's only once I started putting proper real acoustic guitars on it and a proper electric guitar on the top. And then my favourite bit is right at the very end of the chant section. You've got the screaming electric guitar again, which was made in the middle of a thunderstorm in the original. And then I got this idea to put mandolins on there, these cascading mandolins. And they cascade so beautifully against this, you know, background scenario of drama and drums and chanting. And so that's my favourite bit, the mandolins at the end of the chant section of part one. The idea for part two was, it actually started with, I was looking around to find some virtual reality recreations of instruments from the early 70s, 60s even. And I stumbled across, somebody had made a collection of instruments which were used on the early Beatles tracks. And one of those instruments was a clavioline, which I hadn't really heard of before. And it was a very simple, I think valve-based or transistor-based, you know, tone generator. And that was the instrument used on Telstar by the Tornadoes. I think it was one of the first singles I ever bought. And it sounded so strange, you know, it wasn't like a synthesizer, like nothing else. It was only like, sounded like Telstar. So I was messing around with that and I came across this melody which sounded a little bit like Telstar. So, okay, well, I'll make another Telstar. So, you know, 2 days later, here I am with a, you know, new track. And, but it didn't really fit in with Ommadawn, you know, it was like, so I had to kind of de-Telstar it a little bit. And that melody became the introduction melody of part two, which was the whistles made a return, you know, it's like they came back on stage and saying, did something different. And then there's beautiful pianos just after the introduction, but then I was always in my mind thinking, what am I going to do in the horseback section? It's got to have something there. And one day I just picked up the mandolin and I played this, instantly played this, oh, that's nice. So I worked on it and that became, you know, the melody for the end. And it was sounding good. Oh, there was still something missing. And then as I often do, in the middle of the night, I kind of woke up with the eureka moment and said, remember the kids from the original one, you know, singing Hey and Away We Go. So I got up in the middle of the night and tried them out on my new mandolin tune. It was perfect. I had to find the right place to put them. They didn't work everywhere. But so just at the very end of the whole thing, there's the mandolins, the Gibson SG guitars going hell for leather on top of them, and then these little voices in the background going, yeah, away we go. So that's my favourite part of part two. Funnily enough, on the one of the internet sites, people have been posting their own ideas of what the cover should be for months now. Some of them are fantastic, and I like them all. And then there was one day I was having a marathon session binge watching Game of Thrones, and I was thinking of all the snowy scenes, you know, like on the wall, the ice wall. And I started looking at pictures, just doing internet searches of ice. And I suggested it to Phil Smee, the artist, and I sent him a few examples, you know, and he just came up with this picture, you know, of this sort of traveller, you know, lost in this winter wonderland. First of all, he had a wolf next to him, and then there was a strange kind of castle with a city on top. It looked like a sort of witch's hat, and I just thought it was wonderful. So we worked on it for a little bit, you know, new ideas. The wolf became a kind of a reindeer. And and then there was you know, the title, the colour of the type, things like that. And then he had the idea of me taking lots of pictures of all the instruments in my studio. So I went around with my phone and took 100 pictures I took. And I love the artwork, you know. There's going to be people saying, oh, it's some kind of concept album about a man. It's not really, it's just a picture. You know? And the snow seems to fit the music, which is the opposite of here, so, you know. It's just the mood. If you look at the picture and listen to the music, you know, from the ghostly whistle introduction, you kind of feel kind of, ooh, snow, mountains, you know, it's spooky. With vinyl, I'm absolutely delighted that it's back. I do remember when CDs first came out that it was a very positive thing in that the digital quality of the sound was very similar to what I was hearing in my studio when I'd finished an album. So it was nice to know that people would hear the same thing. But as for the actual physical thing, I remember first holding a CD in this little plastic box, you know, it was like writing in a little tiny booklet. It was like, well, yeah. It was like, you know, it wasn't very exciting, the actual thing, in fact, the physical thing. In fact, what I'd forgotten, though, was that what the actual vinyl and the turntable added to the whole ritual of playing your favourite piece of music. First of all, it was a physical thing. It was always a very important moment when you'd finished an album, was to go to the cutting room and you'd see this big complicated machine actually cutting the groove in this completely flat shiny disc. And you'd watch it, and you know, you'd see your music appear in the grooves as little lights and dark patches. And then once we were happy with it, I would always get this sharp little metal stick, and I would write my name on it and the date, so that it was like personalised, you know. And then everything that was pressed had my name on it, my autograph, if you like, and my personal seal. And all that was lost with CDs, and is completely lost now with you know, streaming and internet. So vinyl making a comeback is fantastic. So now you've got back again the physical thing. You've got the artwork. If you've got a gatefold, you've got all this information, and you've got something you can take out, and it's yours. You know, it's not like a thing in the middle of nothing. You know. It's for all those reasons I couldn't be more delighted that vinyl is back. Absolutely. What the experience of being in the Olympic Games gave me was that first time in a long time I didn't feel alone on the stage. Which in the past I've felt that, you know, I was the person bearing all the responsibility for, you know, how good the concert was going to be and everything. But with this, it was a massive collaboration between a fantastic team of, you know, all British, all the best of their, you know, the best in their field. And I loved collaborating with Danny Boyle, you know, with the music. You know, it was a real collaboration. He would be on the end of the phone, and I'd send him things directly, you know, to his phone, and you know, and he'd say, "Well, you know, we're going to change that bit and that bit. I want to hear tubular bells played with handbells." And I said, hey, "Okay," you know, loved it. At times, I have worked with people like Danny Boyle, and even going back to David Putnam with the Killing Fields, like say with Trevor Horn, tubular bells too. I'd love to collaborate with people, but nobody asks for some reason. And because of what I do is a little bit different to everything, so And another artist might think, well, in fact, I was looking on social media, and people often connect me with, well, two people. One is Jean-Michel Jarre, the other is Van Genet. And I was watching a live chat Jean-Michel Jarre was doing about his latest collaborations project, and somebody suggested he collaborated with me, and his reply was that although he loved my music, I think he said that, that I was an acoustic musician and he was electronic. So all I can say is, if anybody wants to collaborate with me, I mean, just you know, ask. I'd love the idea. At the moment, I'm working on a virtual reality project using music from Return to Ommadawn, but I could use any music. It's not a game, although it uses game construction technology, which is basically a very complicated software interface. You can make things in incredible quality nowadays. You know, things that look, you know, almost as good as the best special effects in movies. You know, and it's just an environment which, at the moment, it's on a flat screen, but there's no reason it couldn't be transformed into real immersive 3D. I've still got in my mind the idea of the holodeck from Star Trek. You know, that instead of listening to an album, you go into the album. There'd be strange creatures and the music in it. You know, a completely personal experience. It's a pet project which I've had going on in my mind for a long time, years now. And then after that, I'm trying to solve the very metaphysical problem of why those particular notes of Tubular Bells' introduction are the only notes that work. And if you swap two of the notes, it's gone. You know, it's almost like Zen, you know. So I'm trying to work out what that is. And if I manage to solve it, there probably be a Tubular Bells 4 in next year or the year after.